All right. I always say that. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am Caroline Bast, and I have to remember that this is a different and new podcast. This is not my horse podcast, Everything Horses and More. This is Wisdom of Tao, the Way of Inner Alchemy. So, welcome. Welcome to my first podcast. Today is going to be an introduction to what this podcast is going to be about, as well as why I'm doing a podcast like this. It's been a long time coming. It's been a dream of mine ever since I started this business, Tao Horsemanship, many, many, many years ago. Of course, podcasts were not popular back in the early 2000s, but I couldn't dream enough of how I wanted to get this message out there about the Tao. So bear with me as I introduce what this podcast is going to be about, as well as a little introduction about my personal journey and how I got started becoming a practicing Taoist, as I call myself. So after a few dark years ago, a few challenging years ago, I'm grateful to say I'm not just out of the abyss, the dark hole, I'm back. So, yes, in 2021, I started to take a step back from business for a lot of personal reasons. And then a lot of burnout with my business, huge burnout, a lot of personal issues, health issues with family members. Some of you have heard about this in my other podcast, Everything Horses and More. And um, And that was the best thing I could have done. And so this podcast is going to be about sharing my own personal journey along the way and what has worked for me, what has worked for my students, my clients as a coach, and how the horses have been amazing, transformational, and spiritual guides during this process. So as a lifelong practicing Taoist, I've lost my way more than once, caught in the pool of a superficial life that made me forget who I truly was and what I truly needed. But this time, I return older, wiser, and unafraid. In this podcast, I'll share my journey woven with the wisdom of Tao, the lessons of my horses as my greatest teachers, and the stories of others walking their own path toward finding inner alchemy. Today, I welcome you to the first episode of Wisdom of Tao, The Way of Inner Alchemy, where ancient Eastern philosophy meets the challenges of everyday life, including our horsemanship. I will be offering practical tools for clarity, calm, and conscious living, both personally and, of course, I have the Tao of Horsemanship Online Training Academy, so this is interwoven with everything I do with horses. Who am I? I'm your host, Caroline Best, and I invite you to step into a space of inner stillness, spiritual exploration, and soulful transformation, rooted in the timeless teachings of Tao Te Ching. Tao simply means the way. My logo, Tao Horsemanship, my tagline is the way, capital W, to all possibilities with horses. So the way means the natural order of all things, of the universe, of everything. What is the natural order of everything? It's the natural flow. So at the heart of Taoism lies a simple yet profound message. Live in harmony with nature, the natural flowing order of all things. I mean, isn't that what we all aspire to in our horsemanship? We want to flow with our horses, not fight with our horses. What about all the resistance we find and feel and see in our horses, in our horsemanship? Are we part of the solution or are we part of the problem? And how does that echo or mirror or reflect in our life, in all of our relationships? I definitely believe in all of my experience personally and working with thousands of two and four-legged students that yes, your relationship with your horse is a mirror of your relationship with yourself and your relationships with everyone, every two and four-legged being. I've seen this repeated over and over again in my own personal life, and I've seen it repeated or it shows up in my students. So think about that. If you're struggling with your horse, what are you struggling with? What is it really? It may superficially look like a lesson, a task, a technique, but why is it challenging? Why is there a struggle? Horses are of nature, and like nature, they are teachers, healers, and spiritual guides. When we live close to nature, we also live close to Tao. Harmony arises when we flow in alignment with all things. Harmony. What is a harmonious partnership with our horses? What does that look like? What does a harmonious partnership look like with all of your loved ones? Again, two and four-legged. Your cats, your dogs, your other animals, your cows, your sheep, your birds, your friends, your children, your partners, your spouses, your family members, your best friends, your coworkers, everyone. Where is the flow? So harmony arises when we flow in alignment with all things. It unfolds through simplicity, clarity, and effortless action. And effortless action is what Taoism refers to as the Wu Wei. I talk so much about the Wu Wei in my, excuse me, my big dream writing partnership program. The Wu Wei, to me, it's the path of least resistance. How can I find flow? How can I personally find flow with this horse? How can this horse go back to a state of flow? So, woo wee is a theme we're going to return to often and throughout this podcast. Each episode will explore how to live in harmony with the rhythm of life, how to trust the unfolding process, and how to transform fear, resistance, and tension into a state of flow, clarity, and inner peace, inner ease. Wow. I mean, I'm raising my hand on that one. How many of us just want to have a life of inner ease, but not in a way that we check out or we numb ourselves or we avoid? So, this is the essence of Taoist alchemy. Not just a transformation of the physical, but a deep inner evolution of energy, emotion, and spirit. So, we're going to be diving into principles like the power of stillness as a crucible for real change, the alignment of energy, mind, and body, the alignment. I'm so big. My whole method with horses is about aligning and becoming one in heart, in relationship, heart coherence, becoming one in thought, the power of intention, the mind, connecting to mind, and the power of movement, which is the body. How do we become aligned with the horse so that we are in flow and in rhythm with that? We're going to dive into principles like the spiritual alchemy of turning struggle into strength, the deep inner wisdom of paradox, presence, and the pathless path. So, whether you're walking the spiritual path, seeking emotional healing, well being, or simply learning to surrender to life's natural rhythm, not struggle so much, this podcast is your invitation to slow down, breathe deeply, and return to your center. Because when you align with the Tao, you stop pushing, you start flowing, and everything begins to transform naturally, gently, and powerfully. So let's journey together into the way of inner alchemy. As you move through your day, may you carry the stillness of the Tao in your heart. Trust the process of your becoming and allow life to unfold with grace and presence. All right, a little bit about me. Like I said, this first episode is going to be a big introduction. Also, I'm going to start introducing a couple of my favorite books. And each episode, I'll be taking questions. That's why we're going live. Of course, this will be edited for the audio for the different podcast directories. But I really would like this to blossom into a fully interacting, engaging conversation. All right, a little bit about me. I've been a practicing Taoist since I was a teenager, a path that began with a quiet longing for peace, connection, and harmony that no conventional method of philosophy or therapy could satisfy. So my upbringing at that point was so dysregulated, and there was no harmony in my family. There was drinking, there was alcoholism, there was fighting. My two older brothers were drugging and drinking and getting into a lot of trouble. And I basically, like the horse, I went into self-preservation mode as a teen, and I completely shut down. And I'm still friends with my high school Facebook group, Kenston High School, outside of Chagrin Falls, Ohio. So, for any of you guys, you may see this podcast, you will remember me passing out in high school, dead blackout, and my boyfriend, John, would pick me up. I would break out in sweats and hives, and I'd sweat all the way down, you guys, my shirt to my belt, break out in red flash. So I was going into what self-preservation mode for people in horses. So this is the sympathetic nervous system of freeze, fight, or flight. I was going into deep freeze and into a total catatonic state. And why? Because I was completely, my nervous system completely flooded with stress. Pure and simple stress. Not that simple, right? But stress. So that's the big trauma that happened to me. And it was the most amazing experience of my life coming out of it on the other side, because that became my journey into who I am today and the path that I've taken. So while other teenagers were seeking identity through the world around them, I was turning inward, drawing to timeless teachings of Eastern philosophy and the ancient wisdom of nature. And I had no choice. This was what saved me. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that all became. So Taoism spoke to something deeply familiar inside of me, a knowing I couldn't yet explain, but instinctively understood. Its messages of balance, simplicity, stillness, and surrender gave me not only a spiritual foundation, but a way of being in a world that felt right. And I was blessed to have my backyard horse, Brandy. So he was part of this process and part of being my anchor and my guide. It was also something I desperately needed at the time, as I mentioned. This was my life raft and my guide. And I was blessed to have a phenomenal therapist that turned me on and tuned me into Taoism and Eastern philosophy. And basically, I couldn't speak. So every time I went to therapy to talk, which was weekly, sometimes twice a week, to talk about what was going on, I would just pass out and black out. And so I was an artist. I am an artist. For those of you that know me, I graduated with Bachelor of Fine Arts from Salisbury University, Salisbury, Maryland. So I was an artist, a prolific artist in high school too. I was teaching Sumi painting after this. And yeah, and my watercolors, my pencil drawings. So at that point when I was in therapy and I couldn't speak without passing out because I was so overwhelmed. My system was just so flooded. My therapist was brilliant. And she said, why don't you paint or draw murals, stories, timelines of what's going on and how you feel? And they eventually won me art scholarships into college. But yeah, so I did that. And I think it took maybe about 3 months. I was a sophomore in high school. So I think I stayed in therapy all the way till the end, 2 years, 2 or 3 years I was in therapy. Yeah, it was pretty tough, you guys. My family did not change. My family dynamic did not change this whole time. But I chose to stay there because I had my horse and I had my boyfriend and I had the things that grounded me, and I worked and I enjoyed that independence and my car. So, that was a choice that I made with the help of my therapist. I did go live with my grandmother for a summer too. That's how I got introduced to Salisbury, Maryland. But anyway, getting back to what saved me was the meditation. And that was the beginning of understanding on so many levels your emotions. And that was just the beginning. I'm a teen, there's only so much you're going to be able to grasp cognitively and consciously. And your experience in the world obviously is so limited because you're just a teenager. So Taoism was never just a philosophy for me, it was a way of being and a lifestyle that I chose. It showed me how to live to the best of my ability at the time in alignment with the rhythms within myself and with nature. So that's the amazing effect it had when I began this journey. And this is part of what I teach in my method and in my coaching is how do we become obviously aligned in rhythm with who we are and where we want to be in life. How do we find that flow? And even when it's not flowing, how do we get back in to flow? So yeah, it taught me to the best of my ability how to flow with energy. So the Taoist way shaped everything, my inner peace, my relationships, and most profoundly, my work with horses. And that's later in life. As a teen, you're only conscious of so much. You're trying to get through high school, enjoy your high school. Like I said, I was working, I had my horse, I had my boyfriend, I had certain stability in the midst of absolute chaos, constant chaos. So getting back into horses, when I graduated from high school, I wanted to be an art therapist, and I was studying to be an art therapist. And then my dad decided to get out of the corporate world, and my father, my mother, and I, and my horse moved to Maryland. And I was 19, so I switched a private Catholic college. I was brought up Catholic, um, where they had a great therapy program, and went to Salisbury University, where I then switched to a Bachelor of Fine Arts to get my master's, which I never did do, but I was headed towards my master's in teaching fine arts. So, long story short, when I came to Maryland, that was my not introduction to wild horses because we had always vacationed in Ocean City. I was very familiar with Chincoteague and Assateague Island, Misty of Chincoteague, her baby Stormy of Chincoteague. But when I lived 40 minutes away from Assateague Island, I now had an opportunity, and I love nature, and I was rollerblading and bicycling, and I was riding my horse, my parents' little farm on the eastern shore of Maryland. I was also visiting Assateague on a regular basis. It was like my favorite thing to do several times a week by myself. And that's when I started to study and observe and enjoy the wild Chincoteague ponies, as feral as they are. So that was my introduction into wild horses. And one of the things I realized, and I wasn't training horses, I was going to the university. I had a whole different career path, but I had my backyard horse, and we adopted and rescued a bunch of other animals and horses. And so that was more of a hobby, a passion for me, but I never thought I would be teaching or training or instructing with horses. Instead, I thought I was going to be a Bachelor of Fine Arts teacher. So, I spent a lot of years studying and journaling and sketching the horses. And one of the things, and also I had this amazing relationship with my backyard horse. So when I got back into horses in my mid 30s, and I got back in saying I bought my first farm. I was married to someone else at the time, bought the first farm, had a very successful business in DC in marketing, web, and graphic design, and got burnout. It happens. It happens to a really ambitious, driven people, which I am. And where do you find that balance so you don't get burned out? So, but I didn't really love that job. And I had life coaches as clients, and I wanted to get back into horses, and I wanted to do something really meaningful with my life. And I wanted to help, always wanted to help. Because remember, I wanted to be an art therapist. So I've always wanted to help. And I always have, I've always worked with foster kids and for many, many years during college, I helped out with the Arts Council and the underprivileged kids and teaching them painting and helping to pay for supplies. I mean, I've always wanted to help. And so one of the things that profoundly blew my mind, I don't know how else to say it, when I got back into horses and my late horse Brandy passed away. So 3 years later, I acquired my Trinity, Legend, Smoky, and Sundance. And I was just blown away at how messed up they were and dysfunctional and traumatized and dangerous to themselves and to others. And I know we all can relate on some degree. And here I am, what a dichotomy, I'm like, holy cow, talk about yin and yang. Here I am, I've had such a peaceful, soulful relationship with my late horse of 25 years. That was my first experience riding bridleless and bareback. Brandy was my backyard horse, so I could take him out in a 500-acre field behind us, hay fields, and I could graze him. I could take off jogging. He would come with me. When he laid down, I laid down with him, and then I turned it into a cue. So when I would lay down in his paddock and pat my thighs, he would lay down and put his head on my lap. No one taught me any of that. It was so intuitive, and then I'm watching the peaceful harmony of these beautiful wild horses, and I'm like, holy cow, now I have these three crazy dysfunctional horses of my own that I've rescued. And what a difference. So that became my journey. I'm like, back into horses. What is going wrong here? Because honestly, I was totally naive. And I thought I knew everything I needed to know about horses just because of my backyard horse and watching these wild horses. I knew nothing when I got back into horses because now I had three crazy ass horses to deal with who were injuring themselves. Now they needed this care, that care, needed this kind of food. Everybody was giving me all this advice, and it was beyond overwhelming. But I had the right attitude. I really did. I did not allow myself to get overwhelmed. Like I would feel it. I understood what that felt like, especially being a survivor of severe panic and anxiety attacks when I was a teenager. So I was well aware of what it felt like to get overwhelmed. And I made it my mission the first 2 years that I got back into horses. I'd saved money. I talk about it being a sabbatical so I could pay for the horses and pay for 2 years of me traveling and studying with the best of the best in every discipline because I couldn't figure out how these horses got so messed up. It was so unfamiliar. So the way you all see me today, if any of you are familiar with me, there might be a lot of people that don't have horses that are going to join this podcast, obviously. But if you want to get to know me, you can just check me out on my YouTube channel. So this is me. Like my horses are my best friends. Like we talk to each other all the time. We understand each other. You know, wow, like anything in life, how do you find the flow? And you're going to have times where you're going to have arguments and disagreements and you're not going to agree. How do you find the flow? So that became my journey with my Trinity, Smoky, Legend, and Sundance, getting back to horses, is what's gone wrong here? What has messed these horses up so much? So it became clear that to truly be with horses, I needed to become like them. Wow. So this is huge because I had a very successful, small owned, women owned business in Washington, D.C. for many years with my ex-husband. We had our own marketing, design, and graphic design and web business. And I didn't have any horses. My late horse was at my parents' property with all the other animals, 3 hours away on the eastern shore of Maryland. And, he was old. And here I was, type A personality. I'm going after it. One project after the other, more money. What else can I buy? How, I'm going to live my dream life, independent, paid for everything. Nobody gave me anything. I paid for my college myself. I paid for everything myself. And so I was very independent and very driven. And wow, what a change when I wanted to get back into horses. And so there's a part of me definitely during that time um, that had forgotten how to be a practicing Taoist. And it caught up again, burnout. It caught up with me in my previous career. And it took a couple of years. Again, it was a dark time. It took a couple of years of really questioning what I wanted. And am I happy? And what is making me happy? What isn't making me happy? And again, I was in my mid 30s. So when I got back into horses and I have, I've been so like disconnected from being a practicing Taoist for so many years, probably 10 years or more. And now I've got these three crazy horses, and I've got this fire chakra energy where I'm like, go, go, go. There was no meditating, there was no first chakra, earth chakra, there was no grounding. Um, and so I literally was electrocuting my horses all the time just with my fire chakra. It was so powerful and it was so um, imbalanced. And so, for those of you that aren't aware of the depth of the work that I do, I work primarily with the first four chakras, the chakras closest to sensory awareness and sensory processing, so that we can work the closest with the horse in the way in which they live, and the language of Equus. So there was no first chakra. Like, yeah, I guess I just dismissed it because I didn't have panic attacks or anxiety attacks anymore. Um, so to be like the horse, I needed to find softness. I needed to find my feminine energy. I needed to get centered and grounded and present. I really needed to become attuned. And one of the things that I teach, because this is what I learned when learning how to attune to yourself, attune to the horse, attune to others, attune to nature. I call it becoming a tuning fork, especially within your chakra system. How do we tune in so that we become a tuning fork? The horses are tuning forks. They feel everything. They feel the frequency, the energy of everything through their nervous system, through their heart, through heart coherence, through their nervous system. So how do we, and there they are, as a teacher, how do we strengthen that within us? So my Taoist studies became the foundation of what would become my business, the Tao of Horsemanship. So for those 2 years coming back to horses, I was traveling. I was studying and I was remembering to the best of my knowledge, because I was 9 years old when my father gifted me Brandy, my backyard horse, and he was 7. And I was blessed because Brandy was born on his farm. His mother was still there. He was bottle fed. He only knew one family of humans that took him in their house. But see, my dad was like that. So when we were searching to buy a horse for us, for me, my father's a horse was a horseman too. We looked at a lot of beautiful horses, and we both were like, no, that's just too crazy, way out of our league. So we thought, but Brandy had been bottle fed and handled by one beautiful family, and he was 7. He didn't even go into training till he was 7. That's unheard of. This is back in the 80s. That is unheard of. He wasn't even started until he was 7. So the worst thing Brandy had was he was extremely barn and buddy sour. Of course he was. And but that got fixed when he became my backyard horse. And then it was me that he was looking for and calling out to all the time. So here I am studying with all these world-class trainers and so many different disciplines, from natural horsemanship to reining to liberty to centered riding, trying to think what else, cowmanship. Holy cow. Obstacle course training. Like, I'm with world renowned trainers, classical dressage. I ended up becoming a working equitation instructor here in Florida in 2012. So that's much later. Got back into horses in 2004, 2002, 2004. So I'm studying with all these people, and it's nothing but force and resistance and fear and dominance and submission. It doesn't matter how you call it. And what's scary, being a marketing person, I still do all my own marketing, um, is the manipulation of words. And I didn't like that when I had my own marketing business in DC. I didn't like advertising, couldn't stand it. It was nothing but lies. Um, and it still is. I get caught up and sucked into it. Just look at the things you see on Facebook. Well, buy this, try this, it'll make your skin look better. And it's like, okay, I've been using this for 6 months and I don't see a difference, and I paid a fortune. So there's a lot of bait and switch, as we call it. A lot of bait and switch. It still exists. I think it's a million times worse because of the internet. But getting back to Taoism, and like I said, I'm just giving you guys as quick of a introduction into my journey to this place as possible. Um, that became my journey with horses. And during that process of trying to figure out what's gone wrong with my 3, I didn't create it. How did this all happen? How can I put these pieces together? Because I really don't know their experiences. I did on one level, but you don't know who owned them before and who trained them before. Um, it also became my my stepping stone back into myself. And so during that 2 years of travel and study and reflection, I basically created an ashram at my farm. It was out in Whitehaven, Maryland. It was in Whitehaven. So it was the dead end was the river and the ferry. Um, it was absolutely stunning and surrounded by water and quiet, absolutely quiet. And I can remember the first time, and it took about a year, but I can remember the first time I went out to dinner and dancing with, so I'd left DC, I'd left the crazy city, the subways, the parties, the dancing, the working. I did it all. I had a beautiful life for 7 years. I'm so glad I did that and got it out of my system. And back then in DC was phenomenal in the late 90s, early 2000s. So here I am. It's been about a year. I've shut myself out of everything. I'm now living in the middle of nowhere with water everywhere, and it's quiet and it's peaceful. And I go out to dinner with my husband, ex-husband, but husband at the time, and we meet some friends, and it's I can remember walking into that restaurant, and I can remember for the first time, this is my first time I realized what was going on, that I could actually feel, that I could actually feel the difference in my body. It was a somatic experience, an electrical experience of the pounding of the music in the room next door. And this was a very nice restaurant. The loud noise of all the people was completely packed. And I remember us sitting down at a booth, and we were joining another couple. And I can just remember walking, like being so tuned into energy frequencies. I can remember opening that door and the overwhelm of the noise. The pounding in my ears, the pounding in my body. And this is somebody that was going out to clubs and taking the metro home with my girlfriends and our husbands. Techno music. I used to love dancing to techno music. I still love techno music. I love a lot of music though. And so I'm sitting down, and I'm vibrating. I am literally vibrating, you guys. My ears are vibrating. I can't even explain what changed in me, the level of tuning that was happening. My body had become a tuning, my chakras had become a tuning fork, and I was getting electrocuted. And I'd never felt this way or witnessed this before. Because remember, I left DC, and that was my norm, that lifestyle. And then I had removed myself to nothing but stillness and quiet. And now I reemerged. I submerged myself in the noise again, and I was being totally electrocuted. And no sooner did we sit down, and I can't really explain it. I didn't really know what was going on at the time. It's like you know it inside, but you don't have the experience or the words. And I certainly wasn't teaching. Okay, I was just learning. I was just a student, and I didn't know what to say to my husband at the time, but I started to cry. And our friends had just sat down, and I just started crying. The tears were just coming down my face, and I had to leave. We had to leave. And so that was that was an aha moment for me. And I had to figure out what was going on, what had changed. Um, and so as I reflected back, getting still and getting quiet was the catalyst. Getting still and getting quiet. And part of that process was honoring boundaries for myself, getting to a point where, you know, I see this in my students. I certainly see this in the horses. We are so desensitized. We don't even know how to feel anymore. And a lot of us are just so scared of feeling because we just don't have the skills to handle what we feel. I don't like the word cope. I think it's a very negative, sickening word. So, and I don't like to use the word coping or managing or controlling. Well, controlling is a good word. Just hold on. Let's just use coping and managing. So, how many of us are, oh, we just need to learn how to cope with it? Well, look what happens to horses that learn how to cope. They have all sorts of displaced behaviors because they're coping mechanisms. I don't want to cope. I want to be able to handle it. I want to be able to feel it. I want to be able to navigate it. And again, I didn't have the experience or the wisdom that I have today, so I didn't understand it like I do today. Um, but retracing my steps and trying to figure out what was happening was huge. And like I said, it was such an aha. I'm like, if my system that was so desensitized to all that noise and all that rushing and all that pushing and all that making things happen and controlling everything for all these years. And it took me about a year just to decompress, release. And I wasn't practicing anything except horsemanship and in a way, in a mindset that where I am today. Like I wanted to get back to what was easy with horses. I wanted to get back. My guide was the wild horses of Assateague. My guide was, I want that. And I want what I had with my late horse. I want that flow again. I want that harmony. I want my horses to feel at peace. I want my horses to be healthy and balanced, like I had with Brandy. All the things that I teach today, I had with my late horse. I was just so young. You don't know how you got there. You don't know how you did it. And so getting back into horses, I had to do the best I could to retrace those steps with Brandy. And then also think about, wow, what was I experiencing just observing the wild horses in a healthy, you know, environment. And so now my journey, and it was also a journey back into myself. And, unfortunately, after 15 years together with my first husband, this became the unraveling of our marriage. And I had no idea. All I knew is that I had to get back somehow to me, who I was as a young child, what I loved, what inspired me, what felt good. I was like, I was dead. I was dead inside. And I didn't even know that. Like I knew it because I felt like I was having a little bit of a midlife crisis before I got back into horses. Definitely, I'd hit a hard place and I was questioning like crazy. I had no idea how much I had hardened and basically gave up so many things to achieve these other things that I thought were so important. And they were at the time. I have no regrets. We shouldn't have any regrets. I believe everything happens for a reason and it's a lesson. It's a lesson. It's our journey. So this approach of mine to life, to horses, it is the way. That's Taoism. It is the way. It is the path. It not only transformed my horsemanship, but also my relationships. That's scary. I dropped friends like nobody's business. And it was confusing. It wasn't anything I intentionally wanted to do. There was just such a shift in me that I couldn't even be around so many of the relationships, including my family. So here I am in my mid to late 30s now moving, out of DC, which was 2.5, 3 hours from my dysfunctional parents who are still drinking and fighting. And my brothers had long moved away and had their own families. So now I'm a half an hour from my parents, but I had a lot of healing to do and I didn't even realize it. I had a lot of healing to do and a lot of working on me. I had so much work to be done. And I want to pay tribute to my first marriage because the person that I chose was the perfect person for me at the time. Very easy and safe. And we had a beautiful friendship and a beautiful marriage for a long time until we didn't anymore. And so, that's scary. I know it is for a lot of people. I know that change is so scary. So this way not only changed my horsemanship, it also changed all of my relationships. It's like, I don't know if this is really a saying, but I say this often, you don't really know who really loves you and cares about you until you hit a crisis, whether it's a crisis in your life or a crisis with that person. You don't really know who they are until shit hits the fan. So when shit hits the fan, whether you're changing, they're changing, everything's changing, are they still there? Are they still there? That's number one. And number two is, do they bring value? Do the people in your life bring value to your life? Do they add or do they take from you? I know it's not always 100% in either, and there's compromises. I'm married again. I get that. So this became my way of getting back into balance. I was so out of balance, health, well being, healing. I had no idea I was going to go through another round of healing. So the first conscious round of healing was when I was a teenager and I had that wonderful therapist. I say conscious. You only know so much as a teen. So let's say that stops when I was 18 and now, oh my gosh, 20 years later. 20 years later, I'd lived my life, I had fun, I had attained superficial everything I wanted, traveling, cars, nice home, clothes. Uh, Now what do I want? Wow, what I have I don't want anymore. Not like this. Not like this. Including my marriage. And I was married to my best friend. So this way has taught me it's always a work in progress. How to live in harmony with life's changes to the best of my ability. There's the flow. How to listen more deeply, how to have the courage to listen to yourself. That's a big one. And how to lead with heart, how to lead with my heart. Most of all, it's given me the tools to regulate my nervous system, trust my intuition, do my best to show up with grace, not always, and strength, whether in a training session, a personal challenge, or a moment of stillness. Especially Taoism has helped me see that horses are not something we train. They are beings we connect with on so many levels and wherever you're at. They're always there waiting for us. They are teachers, they're mirrors, they're companions on our spiritual path. I say they're our spirit guides often. I know mine have been. I've had many horses throughout the years, and it still fascinates me to this day that each of my horses has shown me a piece of myself. Like, not one horse has shown me all of me. Maybe could say legend. And there's my Trinity behind me. Legends in the middle, the Arabian, Smoky's the black horse, Sundance was the white horse. But it's like each one, when I was ready, really showed me a part of myself that was ready for change, ready for growth. All right. So that's the beginning of my journey. Needless to say, through the farm in Whitehaven, through this 2-year sabbatical, there was so much change. Inevitably, obviously my first marriage, we ended up divorcing. And I often say that I lost my marriage, but I found myself. And we definitely grew apart. And yeah, and it's been an amazing journey following this path in every way. There are no regrets, no looking back. I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change it for the fear of stability because I had so much stability. I built, growing up, I had no stability growing up. And how many of us can relate? I had no financial stability, even though we were upper middle class, money was always an issue between my parents. That's why my brothers and I started working at the age of 12. I had 3 jobs at the age of 12. I rode the Barnes ponies for their 4-H club, and the kids who got thrown all the time, I rode their ponies for $2 a pony because I would not only stay on them, I was supposed to exercise them before they went off to their shows, but I loved them and talked to them. So I got $2 a pony. Then I was cleaning houses and babysitting. So those were my 3 jobs at the age of 12. And it didn't stop. And so, I grew up with a total lack of stability. And I know so many of us can relate to that in our family dynamic. And then through our life, our journey, we try to do our best to undo what's been done. Because for so many years, just like our horses, you learn coping skills, you learn ways of just trying to manage and survive the trauma that was bestowed upon us. And, definitely I had no idea, coming back into horses, how much it's like I needed that 20 years of being on that path and feeling safe, in that relationship, safe enough to feel strong enough now and have the courage. Because I was so naive, I had no idea 20 years later to now go, wow, I need to really work on me and all of this leftover shit and baggage that the younger me obviously did not have the skills or the wherewithal or the desire, or I didn't even have the consciousness. I wasn't even aware of how much I needed to work on, and I wasn't ready. I just wanted to have fun. It's like after I got done paying my way through school and working 2 or 3 jobs, I partied for a few years and was a starving artist selling my artwork and waitressing and bartending in between Ocean City. So, I wanted to play, and I didn't get to play much in college at all and enjoy that. And I'd made so many wonderful friendships in college, and I did that. And then I was ready to start my career, and I started that career. Um, so I get it. I get it. And we all have to be in a place where we're really ready and open and respect at the same time, respect our boundaries. Like, how much can we take? And so before we're going to keep going for a little bit longer. I want to introduce some of the things we're going to be talking about during this podcast. One of my favorite books, and I did a podcast on this a few years ago, is Dr. Wayne Dyer, Living the Wisdom of the Tao, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And then I'm also going to be referencing and talking a little bit about the great book, The I Ching, the Book of Changes. This is really a complicated read and understanding. So I'm only going to be referencing this a little bit. It's so powerful though. And if you break things down, it's so powerful. And then how to apply what we're reading. How do we apply this to everyday life? So I'm going to do the preface of Dr. Wayne Dyer's book, Living the Wisdom of Tao. And so he became a Taoist later in life. He was a therapist, I think a psychiatrist, psychologist, and very well known. He's written so many books. And this is a wonderful book. Progress is impossible without change. And those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. George Bernard Shaw. That's powerful. Progress is impossible without change. So this is with everything in life, your horsemanship, your relationships, how you feel, but it takes courage, doesn't it? So, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life is the end product of my year-long journey of research. And of course, this is Dr. Wayne Dyer speaking. Product of my year-long journey of research, contemplation and application of the Tao teaching, a book of wisdom that's been translated more than any volume in the world, with the exception of the Bible. Many scholars consider this Chinese classic the ultimate discourse on the nature of existence, and it continues to be a valuable resource for achieving a way of life that guarantees integrity, joy, peace, and balance. I recently read about someone who overcame life-threatening addictive behaviors by reading and rereading the 81 verses of this ancient text. Just imagine, in fewer than 100 short passages, it describes a way of living that's balanced, moral, and spiritual. And that works for all facets of life on earth. It sure does. Legend tells us that the Tao Te Ching was authorized by Lao Tzu, a prophet who was also the keeper of the imperial archives in the ancient capital of Luoyang. Seeing the continual decay during a period of warring states, Lao Tzu decided to ride westward into the desert. At the Hankou Pass, a gatekeeper named Yingxi, knowing of Lao Tzu's reputation for being a man of wisdom, begged him to record the essence of his teaching. Thus, the Tao Te Ching was born out of 5,000 Chinese characters. In all my reading on the origins of the Tao Te Ching, I never found a definitive historical record. He never found one. I never found a definitive historical record of its writing. Yet today it survives in thousands of versions in virtually every language. In fact, after reading this classic text one morning and then taking a different interpretation that afternoon, I was hooked. I ordered more translations, 5 of which were quite old and 5 of which were modern. You'll find their titles in the acknowledgments. Since neither Lao Tzu nor the origins of his verses are historically certain, I was fascinated by the different ways the 5,000 characters were interpreted by scholars in the editions I studied, especially when you consider that many of these ancient Chinese symbols are no longer in use and invite differing translations themselves. This is so true. And I knew nothing about this when I created Tao horsemanship. Like, I was a practicing Taoist, but I had to speak with 3 professors at Columbia's University of Buddhism outside of DC to make sure that when I created my logo, which is the symbol on my wrist and the symbol in my logo, that this character is the correct symbol for horsemanship. It's the Chinese character for horsemanship. You have the little 4 hoofbeats. So yeah, I had to consult with 3 professors, to make sure that it's crazy, these symbols. So I get back to, he was fascinated by the different ways the 5,000 characters were interpreted by scholars in the editions I studied, especially when you consider that many of these ancient Chinese symbols are no longer in use and invite differing translations. I then felt called upon to write an essay for each verse that showed its valuable wisdom applied to the 21st century. From those 10 translations I'd gone over, I pieced together the 81 passages in Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, based on how they resonated with me. This book is my personal interpretation of the Tao Te Ching, and we'll be going through this book, each verse of which gave me an insight into life and nature. As you read on, know that these pages were pasted together from what I personally felt were the most useful aspects of those 10 different translations I studied. And I apologize for any exclusions or if the inclusions don't seem to be a perfect fit. One of the many gifts of the Tao Te Ching is its mind-stretching quality, especially in the way the Lao Tzu uses irony and paradox to get you to look at life. If you think that being forceful is the appropriate response, Lao Tzu urges you to see the value in being humble. If action seems called for, he asks you to consider non-action. That's the wu-wei. If you feel that grasping will help you acquire what you need or want, he counsels you to let go and be patient. And just what is this thing called the Tao? As we're told in the first verse, to name it is to lose it. So here's the best that I can come up with. The Tao is the supreme reality, an all-pervasive source of everything. The Tao never begins or ends, does nothing, and yet animates everything in the world of form and boundaries, which is called the world of the 10,000 things. Commentaries on the Tao Te Ching generally interpret Tao as the way. T as the shape and power. That is how the Tao manifests, and Ching as book. Every translation I read referred to the Tao as the way with a capital W and the T as TE, the capital T, as adding light or color to the way. Well, as I look at the name I've carried with me for over 65 years, Wayne, and he italicizes W-A-Y in Wayne Dyer, I realize what may have attracted me to studying and writing these essays, exclamation mark. As you can see, the first three letters of my name make up the word way, while a dyer is one who adds light or color. Isn't that absolutely fascinating? Gives me chills. I wish I could have met Dr. Dyer. Oof, I'm high right now. Ooh, wow, 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 wow. That's just amazing. Not literally, in a natural way, guys. Wow, I'm buzzing. It's no wonder why I've been so totally involved in reading, writing, interpreting, and most significantly, putting into practice these 81 verses. In The Wisdom of China and India, Dr. Lin Yutang states, if there is one book in the whole of Oriental literature which should be read above all others, it is, in my opinion, Lao Tzu's Book of Tao. It is one of the profoundest books in the world's philosophy. As you read Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, you're going to find your way through Lao Tzu's mystical and practical philosophy, along with the joy of applying it to your life in today's modern world. Writing this book was a complete surrender to ideas that didn't always seem to fit a linear, rational approach. And it has changed me in a way that's like the Tao itself, unexplainable and unnameable. Once I knew that I'd be spending a year on this project, its creation came about in the following way, which I have journaled for you. I awake before 4 a.m., meditate, consume juices and supplements, and enter my sacred writing space. On a table, I have some framed drawings of Lao Tzu. In one, he's clad in simple robes, in another, he's standing with a staff, and in a third, he's astride an ox. I ease into my work and read one verse of the Tao Te Ching, letting the words stay with me and inviting the forces of both the outer and the inner life to inform me. Some of the passages contain ideas that seem to be directed to political leaders, yet in all cases, I keep the average reader in mind. In other words, I seek the wisdom for everyone, not just for those in positions of government or business. I jot down a few notes, and for the next 3 days, I think about what Lao Tzu is offering. I invite the Tao to be with me throughout the day and all my activities as a background to the title of this book, Change Your Thoughts, Wayne. I tell myself, and watch how your life changes. And my thoughts do change. That's pretty powerful. Let's just sit with that for a few seconds. Remember, change your thoughts, and you change your life. I feel, I feel the Tao is with me, always there, always doing nothing, and always leaving absolutely nothing undone. As I'm now seeing with a capital S, the landscape looks different. That's how I felt when I walked into that restaurant. I wasn't just seeing, I was feeling, really feeling for the first time. I see, the people I see are godly creations who are ignoring their own nature, or even more poignantly, needily interfering in the affairs of others. I have a different perspective now. I feel more peaceful and patient. I keep being reminded of the cyclical nature of the world of the 10,000 things and have powerful insights that change what I see. I know that we humans are like the rest of the natural world, and that sadness, fear, frustration, or any troubling feeling cannot last. Nature doesn't create a storm that never ends. Within misfortune, good fortune hides. Following my days of thinking and then applying the wisdom of a particular verse, I look into the eyes of Lao Tzu's picture in the early morning and I wonder, what did you mean? How does this apply here today to anyone who might want to live according to these majestic teachings? What happens next is mind blowing in that it simply comes. Through the ages, through the atmosphere, through my purple pen and onto the page flows what I can only call automatic writing. I know I don't own it. I know I can't touch it, feel it, see it, or even name it. But the words arrive in the world of the 10,000 things. I'm grateful, bewildered, astonished, and overjoyed. The next day, I begin another 4-day adventure with the wisdom a Chinese master recorded 2,500 years ago. Feeling so blessed, honored, and completely awestruck by the profound impact these words have on me. Dr. Dyer continues, it's my vision that in this 21st century, our world must recruit future leaders who are steeped in the importance of Lao Tzu's words. Our survival may depend on understanding that the concepts of enemy and war can cease to exist through living Tao-centered lives. Government will need to retreat from regulating our personal lives, overly taxing our income, and invading our privacy. Yet the lessons and truths of the Tao must be discovered and applied by individuals. In this way, it can bring you to the enormous wonder of your own being. Yes, you are the Tao at work. Your being came from and will return to non-being. So for maximum enjoyment and benefit, make reading this book a personal journey. First, peruse one of the passages of the Tao Te Ching and the essay that follows it. Next, spend some time applying it, changing the way you've been conditioned to think and letting yourself open up to a new way of conceptualizing these ideas. Finally, individualize the verse by writing, recording, drawing, or expressing yourself in whatever way you're called to. And move on to the next verse with a rhythm that suits your nature. The following is from 365 Tao, Daily Meditations by Deng Ming Dao, which I love to turn to each day. Read this excerpt and see the Tao coming alive within you. If you spend a long period of time in study and self-cultivation, you will enter Tao. By doing so, you also enter a world of extraordinary perceptions. You experience unimaginable things, receive thoughts and learning as if from nowhere, perceive things that could be classified as prescient. Yet if you try to communicate what you experience, there is no one to understand you, no one who will believe you. The more you walk this road, the farther you are from the ordinary ways of society. You may see the truth, but you will find that people would rather listen to politicians, performers, and charlatans. I couldn't agree more. If you are known as a follower of Tao, people may seek you out. but they are seldom the ones who truly understand Tao. They are people who will exploit Tao as a crutch. To speak to them of the wonders you have seen is often to engage in a futile bout of miscommunication. That is why it is said that those who know do not speak. Why not simply stay quiet? Enjoy Tao as you will. Let others think you are dumb. Inside yourself, you will know the joy of Tao's mysteries. If you meet someone who can profit by your experience, you should share. But if you are merely a wanderer in a crowd of strangers, it is wisdom to be silent. So, for all of my students that are familiar with me, I think this speaks loudly of who I am and where I am in my work. Dr. Dyer writes, perhaps the overriding message of the Tao Te Ching is to learn how to luxuriate in the simplicity of what you're being told throughout the ancient sacred text. As you put its ideas into practice, you'll discover how profound it all is, but then you'll find yourself startled by its simplicity and naturalness. The advice of this ancient master is so easy to apply that you mustn't try to complicate it. Simply allow yourself to stay in harmony with your nature, which can be trusted if you just listen. Be still and listen and act accordingly. I hope that you'll feel joyously in love with Lao Tzu and his wondrous Tao Te Ching, and that you'll add your light and color to the great way. I offer you my love along with my commitment to a Tao-centered world. I can think of no greater vision for you, for our planet, or for our universe. Dr. Wayne W. Dyer, Maui, Hawaii. Oh, I could cry. I'm going to read a couple more things, and then I'm going to end this first episode. And I plan on doing this weekly, unless something gets in the way. Of birds, I know that they have wings to fly. Of fish, that they have fins to swim with. Of wild beasts, that they have feet to run with. For feet, there are traps, for fins, nets, for wings, arrows. But who knows how dragons surmount wind and cloud into heaven? This day I have seen Lao Tzu, and he is a dragon. From The Way of Life According to Lao Tzu, translated by Witter Binner. This quote is attributed to Confucius after he visited the elder Lao Tzu to seek advice on points of ceremonial etiquette. I'll read that again. Of birds, I know that they have wings to fly with. Of fish, that they have fins to swim with. Of wild beasts, that they have feet to run with. For feet, there are traps, for fins, nets, for wings, arrows. But who knows how dragons surmount wind and cloud into heaven? This day I have seen Lao Tzu, and he is a dragon. I will leave you with one more thing. I wrote this. Until the next time, I leave you with this. Spiritual awakening is the moment you truly come home to yourself. It's when you begin to see who you really are and what your soul truly needs. You allow yourself to feel fully and honestly without clinging to the emotions that once held you captive. Through this, you release the old negative thought patterns, emotional baggage, and conditional ways of being. As you let go of ego, past trauma, and fear, the inner resistance begins to dissolve. Defensiveness softens, insecurity fades, the need to control everything loosens its grip. From this place, life flows with greater ease. You feel more grounded, more at peace, more confident in your choices. Your inner voice grows strong and steady as your anchor and your guide. This is the gift of awakening, a life lived from clarity, trust, and authentic connection with yourself and the world around you. Namaste, and also may you always be one with your horse. Until next week, have a wonderful week, and please feel free to Leave me some questions. I would love to have more engagement. Hopefully, this will continue to grow. See you guys next time.